Welcome back to These Things Are Written on this Wednesday. Glad that you've joined us again today as we are continuing to look at Psalm 9. Remember that this is a psalm of praise. And so far we've been looking at the structure and the attributes of God that the psalmist is praising. We're going to continue that. The attributes we saw yesterday was the attributes of omnipotence and of righteous judgment. And we are going to see those continued a little bit today. But first, I'm going to read verses 7 through 12, and I invite you to follow along in your Bible. But the Lord sits enthroned forever. He has established his throne for justice, and he judges the world with righteousness. He judges the people with uprightness. The Lord is a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in time of trouble. And those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Sing praise to the Lord, who sits enthroned on Zion. Tell among the people his deeds, for he who avenges blood is mindful of them. He does not forget the cry of the afflicted. This is the word of the Lord. Again, we're going to be looking at the structure and the attributes. One thing to notice in this passage is how the object of the speaker is changing, of who he is speaking to. First of all, he seems to be proclaiming the Lord to those who are listening in the first couple of verses, first 3 verses, and then he turns back to speaking to the Lord, and then he moves back to speaking to the people. Again, it makes that change between speaking to them or speaking to you, O Lord. So we're going to be following through that a little bit as we go. Verse 7, it really starts to be a contrast of the previous verses. The previous verses were all about the judgment of the nations and what God has done to them. But here he focuses back on the Lord and the power and who he is. While they are perishing, the Lord will sit enthroned forever. And then he talks about, in the next 3 lines, kind of builds on that. He establishes his throne for justice, the purpose of that throne. And then he builds on that, judges the world with righteousness, judges the people with uprightness. You see how they are parallel, but they're building on what he is there and his purpose. That just king we see in those parallel verses as they continue to expand. Verses 9 through 10, again, have a parallel focus, but this time it's on the Lord being not a king who's enthroned forever, an eternal king, but more of a judge, someone who is there as a stronghold, I guess you would say, for the oppressed, for those who are humbled, for those going through difficult times of troubles. The Lord is there. He has not forgotten them, and he is continuing to lead them. So again, in verses 9 and 10, we see that continuing, that parallelism continuing, first of all, talking about him, but then pointing out that to the Lord himself of those that trust in him. And then after that, we kind of, in verses 11 and 12, really in some ways summarizes verses 3 through 10. Verses 7 and 8 are summarized by verse 11. Sing praise to the Lord who sits enthroned in Zion. Tell among the people his deeds, again focusing on the Lord sitting who is enthroned. Verse 12, the first line, for he who avenges the blood is mindful of them. Again, focusing on verses 3 through 6 that we looked at yesterday. And then the second line focuses on verses 9 and 10, who does not forget the cry of the afflicted. That's kind of the structure so far that we see, that we're building on as we go through this great psalm. So what are the attributes we're looking at? Well, we see that the first few verses focus on Jesus being a just king and judge. But more than that, he is an eternal just king and judge. That is an amazing attribute there, a mouthful in itself. And the second attribute is that he is a stronghold for the oppressed. So you see his glory as a king, but his kingdom is not for him. His kingdom is to support those who are oppressed and struggling and going through times of difficulty. So let's apply that to us again today. He is there. He is a stronghold for us in times of trouble. And yes, I do believe that we are going through times of trouble through this COVID pandemic. We're getting used to it, aren't we? But yet we are seeing more people struggling with COVID now than we have before in many ways. And we're seeing more people struggling with the isolation that it causes. But remember, those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. The Lord has not forsaken us. He will answer our prayers. He will restore us in his time. We wait on the Lord, for he is good. Go in peace, and we'll see you tomorrow.